Baldwin IV was born into a world of conflict and faith, a prince of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. This kingdom was a Christian state created by European knights during the First Crusade. It was a small, fragile land surrounded by powerful enemies. Baldwin's father was King Amalric I, a strong ruler who worked hard to protect his kingdom. From a young age, Baldwin was prepared for a life of duty. He was taught how to ride a horse, how to fight with a sword, and how to lead men in battle. These were the essential skills for any noble boy who might one day wear the crown in such a dangerous place. His childhood was spent in the sun-drenched courtyards and grand halls of Jerusalem. He was a bright and promising boy, full of life and energy. His tutor, a very learned man named William of Tyre, noticed something unusual about him. While playing with other boys, Baldwin did not seem to feel pain when they pinched or struck his arm. This lack of feeling was the first sign of a terrible illness that would come to define his life and his reign. At the time, no one fully understood what it meant, but it was a quiet shadow that had begun to fall over the young prince's future. When Baldwin was only 13 years old, his father, King Amalric, died suddenly in the year 1174. The great responsibility of the kingdom fell upon the shoulders of this young boy. He was crowned King Baldwin IV in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the holiest site in Christianity. This was the very place where Christians believed Jesus was crucified and resurrected. It was a heavy burden for anyone, let alone a teenager, who was just beginning to understand the immense challenges he would face as the ruler of a kingdom constantly under threat from all sides. Becoming king at such a young age meant he needed guidance. The court was filled with powerful nobles, each with their own ambitions and ideas about how the kingdom should be run. These men would serve as his advisors and regents, helping him rule until he was old enough to take full command. But Baldwin was no mere puppet. He was intelligent and determined, learning quickly about the complex politics of his court. He understood that he had to be strong, not just for himself, but for the thousands of people who now looked to him as their protector and their king. The strange illness that his tutor had noticed in his childhood was soon given a name: leprosy. In the 12th century, this disease was greatly feared and poorly understood. It was seen by many as a curse or a punishment from God. Leprosy attacks the nerves, causing a loss of feeling in the skin, and over time it can lead to terrible disfigurement. For a king whose physical strength was a symbol of his right to rule, this was a devastating diagnosis. It meant that Baldwin's life would be a constant struggle against pain, weakness, and the prejudices of his own people. Despite the progression of his illness, Baldwin refused to hide away from his duties. He was determined to be a true king to his people. The disease made it difficult for him to ride a horse or hold a sword, yet he insisted on leading his armies in person. He couldn't feel his hands or feet properly, but he still wore the heavy armor of a knight and sat atop his war horse at the head of his troops. This incredible display of courage earned him the respect and loyalty of his soldiers, who saw a king willing to share their dangers, no matter the personal cost to his own health. His public appearances became more challenging as the disease worsened. In the film Kingdom of Heaven, I wore a silver mask to hide the effects of the illness. But in reality, there is no historical evidence that he did so. He likely used veils or simply endured the stares of others. The sickness prevented him from marrying and having children, which was a very serious problem for a king. A king needed an heir to secure the future of the dynasty and the stability of the kingdom. This lack of a direct heir created constant political scheming among the nobles of his court as they all vied for influence and power. Baldwin's mind, however, remained sharp and clear, untouched by the disease that was destroying his body. He proved to be a wise and capable ruler, skilled in diplomacy and strategy. He understood the delicate balance of power in the Middle East and worked to maintain truces when possible and to fight when necessary. He knew his time was short, and this knowledge seemed to give him a clarity and a sense of purpose that many rulers who live long lives never find. He focused all his remaining strength on one single vital goal: the preservation of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. In 1177, the great Muslim leader Saladin saw an opportunity to strike a decisive blow against the Kingdom of Jerusalem. He gathered a massive army, estimated to be over 26,000 soldiers, and marched towards the city of Ascalon. The Christian kingdom was in a perilous position. Most of its main army was away in the north, leaving the path to Jerusalem dangerously exposed. King Baldwin IV, who was only 16 years old at the time, was left with a very small force of a few hundred knights and a few thousand infantrymen to confront this overwhelming threat. Many believed that the kingdom was doomed. Despite his youth and his debilitating illness, Baldwin did not hesitate. He refused to stay behind the walls of Jerusalem and wait for Saladin to arrive. Instead, he made a bold and courageous decision to lead his small army out to meet the enemy. He was so weakened by his leprosy that he had to be carried on a litter, a type of bed frame carried by men. Yet his presence inspired his knights and soldiers with incredible bravery. They saw their young king suffering but resolute, and they were filled with a determination to fight and die for him and their kingdom. The two armies met near a castle called Montgisard on November 25, 1177. Saladin, confident in his superior numbers, had allowed his army to become spread out, not expecting the small Christian force to dare to attack him directly. This was the moment Baldwin and his commanders had been waiting for. Seeing their chance, the Christian knights charged. They rode with a fury and a purpose that stunned Saladin's forces. Leading the charge was the holy relic of the true cross, which was carried before the army to give them spiritual strength and courage in the face of impossible odds. The battle was a shocking and complete victory for the Kingdom of Jerusalem. Baldwin's small, determined army shattered Saladin's much larger force. Saladin himself barely escaped with his life. His army scattered and defeated. It was a legendary victory, a triumph against all expectations. The young, sick king had proven himself to be a brilliant military leader, saving his kingdom from certain destruction. The Battle of Montgisard became a symbol of his reign, a testament to the idea that courage and spirit could overcome even the greatest physical weakness and the most daunting of challenges. It was his finest hour. Even with the great victory at Montgisard, the challenges facing Baldwin IV never went away. His worsening health was a constant source of instability for the kingdom. As he grew weaker, the factions at court grew stronger and more aggressive. The nobles were divided into two main groups. One group, known as the Court Party, was led by his mother, Agnes of Courtenay, and her ambitious brother, Jocelyn. They favored a more aggressive policy against Saladin. The other group, the native barons, led by Raymond of Tripoli, preferred diplomacy and believed in coexisting with their Muslim neighbors whenever possible. These internal divisions created a toxic political environment. Baldwin had to spend much of his energy managing the rivalries and conspiracies of his own nobles. The most difficult issue was the succession, since Baldwin could not have a child. His heir was his young nephew, also named Baldwin. To secure the future, Baldwin IV had his nephew crowned as co-king, becoming Baldwin V. However, the boy was just a child, and the question of who would rule as regent for him became a bitter point of contention among the powerful families of the kingdom, each wanting to control the throne. The final years of Baldwin's life were filled with pain and political turmoil. He eventually lost his sight and the use of his limbs, becoming completely dependent on others for his care. Yet, he continued to hold his kingdom together through sheer force of will. He ruled from his bed, making decisions and issuing orders, his mind as sharp as ever, even as his body failed him completely. He appointed Raymond of Tripoli as regent for his young nephew, hoping the experienced nobleman could provide the stability the kingdom desperately needed after he was gone. His reign was a constant battle on two fronts: against Saladin outside his borders and against his own illness and court politics within. Baldwin IV died in the spring of 1185 at the age of just 24. His young nephew, King Baldwin V, died only a year later. The careful plans Baldwin IV had made to secure the future of his kingdom fell apart. The aggressive court faction seized power, leading the kingdom into a disastrous war with Saladin. In 1187, just 2 years after the leper king's death, the army of Jerusalem was annihilated at the Battle of Hattin, and Saladin captured the city of Jerusalem. Baldwin IV is remembered as the last great king of Jerusalem, a tragic figure whose courage and wisdom held his fragile kingdom together against all odds.